As I examine our climate right now, I realize that there are a lot of difficult things that are going on in our society right now. As people are marching and demanding change, I realize as a black man, I realize also as a Christian man, and I realize also as a minister of the gospel, that this is a very complex situation that many people seem to be searching for answers. And I want to present two things, not only for the church, but also for the people to realize that there are some things that we can do. And so first I want to speak as a Christian man and as a gospel preacher. One, we have a responsibility that the thing that keeps the knee on the neck of those that are being oppressed is that there is a heart issue. There's a heart issue if that I can pull the trigger and I don't feel anything. There's a heart issue that I can beat you over the head and I don't even care about the blood that is spewing, and I don't care about the screams that are in the background and the families that are being torn apart. I realize that there is a heart issue when something is done wrong and politicians don't apologize and judges have no remorse. I realize that there is a heart issue as a Christian. So it doesn't matter what color you are, as a Christian, and you see the unrest that's going on, we have a responsibility to get the gospel and get Jesus in the hearts of people. The politicians, the government, there are entities that they don't know what to do because they want people to love. But we realize as Christians, the answer to that is Jesus Christ. For you cannot love properly unless you have Jesus Christ in your life. So we have a responsibility. If there was ever a time to evangelize, if there was ever a time that we are in need to go out and to communicate Jesus Christ and give that message, the time is now. If there was ever a time for us to show the love of God, the time is now. So one part, somebody asks, hey, what do we do? As a church, hearts do not change by law. Hearts change when they get introduced to Jesus Christ. So maybe when you turn on the news, this is an indictment against the church because we're not doing our job. Because if we were able to communicate Jesus into the hearts and the minds of the people, then maybe they would have lifted up their knee and maybe people will be able to breathe. Maybe there would be families that would not have been torn apart because of racism or hate. It doesn't matter what color you are. If you're a Christian, our responsibility for the offender and the offended is we got to tell both individuals about Jesus Christ. Paul was a murderer. But God still loved him enough to send him Ananias and share with him the gospel. We have a responsibility to tell everybody about Jesus Christ. And then there's a second part. Somebody says, okay, well, after we do that, what else do we need to do? Because there are some people that are frustrated with the church because we can talk about love, but I believe this. I believe that revolution and Christianity actually go hand in hand. I believe in revolution. I believe that when somebody is doing something wrong, that as a Christian, you're supposed to stand up. So Jesus gives a story of the Good Samaritan. And there was a man that was beaten. There was a man that was robbed. There was a man that was naked alongside of the road. And those in the community that were supposed to stop and help, they did not. But the Bible says that Jesus introduces a character which we refer to as the Good Samaritan. And he saw the man that was beaten. He saw the man that was abused. He saw the man that was done wrong. He picked that man up. He cleaned that man up. He took him to the inn. He actually paid the cost. He paid the cost at the end and said, listen, if that man has any other charges, you let me know because I'm coming back through and I'll pay the cost. This is Jesus's parable, and he's teaching this to the church and letting us know when you see somebody beaten, bruised, and naked, you have a responsibility to stand up and address that. So I believe that revolution and Christianity actually go hand in hand. Tearing down strongholds is what Christians do. Fighting demonic, fighting evil spirits is what we do. Our fight is actually not against flesh and blood. There is a demonic spirit that's amongst us. And the responsibility of the church is not to sit back and close our eyes. Faith without works is dead. So praying without action is a dead religion. Praying without movement is a dead faith. So when you pray to ask God to come and help in this time and this season, then after you finish praying, I need you to get up and move. The question is, how do we move? One thing that I realize is they will let you march. Matter of fact, we've been marching since the 60s, 70s. Matter of fact, when Castile was shot and killed, we marched the streets. When Trayvon Martin was killed, we marched the streets. There are many individuals. When we saw the tape, we saw the video, and we marched. They don't care if you march. Matter of fact, they say, hey, listen, we need you to vote. We need you to sign up and vote. They don't care if you vote because they will alter your vote. The problem is this: the system is broken. And if the system is broken, stop feeding the system. The system needs to be drained. The system needs to be killed. As a Christian, we don't desire to harm anybody. As a Christian, we don't desire to hurt anybody. Our fight is not against flesh and blood. There is a demonic stronghold that needs to be torn down. And unless we change the laws, I'm talking to the church, unless we gather together, we can sing about it, we can preach about it, we can stand up, coming together and saying that we don't agree with what happened. They don't care. They don't care that you stand and say, we don't like what you did. If we don't come together and stop the funding, and if we don't come together and change the laws, then the only thing that we have is songs and worn out shoes from marching. That's it. You know what the police will do? The police will sit back. The politicians, the leaders will sit back. They will watch you march down the street, sing your song, and then tell you to go home. You'll wake up on Monday morning and nothing has changed. Nothing will change. So this is what I propose. We need to get rid of absolute immunity. We need to get rid of absolute immunity. If a politician does something wrong, you can't charge them, you can't sue them because they have protection. If a judge unlawfully sends a black man to prison for 40 years, for 30 years, for 20 years, the judge doesn't even have to say, I'm sorry. You know why? Because judges have absolute immunity. If a police officer does something, you can't go and sue that police officer. Why? Because they're protected. What if, as a church, we gather together to lead this revolution? Instead of watching the world and watching individuals get angry enough to try to do something, what if we gathered together, brought our resources together, and we changed at least one law? Let's remove absolute immunity. Because when a judge does something wrong, and when a judge decides that they want to ignore evidence, when a judge decides that they don't want to follow through with the law, there's nothing that you can do. I don't know if you've ever sat in a courtroom before, but if you've ever sat in a courtroom before and you saw something that was done that was unlawful, you almost kind of looked around because there was nobody to talk to. You know why? Because you can't touch a judge because they have shielded themselves. See, listen, it's not police officers that only have their knee on the necks of those that are oppressed. It's also judges and it's also politicians. And you know what all of them say? All of them say, hey, listen, we need you to vote. We'll take your vote, we'll cut it in half, and we'll fix it so that we can stay in power. They want you to buy into the system because the system keeps them on the benches. The system keeps them with the badges. The system keeps them in office. When there is something that is wrong in our society and the problem is not a person and the problem is not a color, you know what the problem is? The legal system was never built for justice. Not for Hispanics, not for Asians, not for blacks. The system was built to oppress all and keep others in power. Those courthouses, don't just march the streets. Go to the courthouses and start filing, change the law. When a judge does something wrong, you should be able to sue that judge. In today's society, you can't do that. If a politician decides to do something wrong, you can't go after that politician. You know why? Because they have shields and they have a shield around them that allows them to be protected from the common man. The system should have been created to take care of those who are Asians and those who are Indians and those who were Hispanics and blacks. The system and the laws should have been there to support, but they have not been. We need to be able to have the focus to go to Congress, because marching in the streets, they will just watch you. But if we gathered on Congress and demanded Congress to change the law about immunity, we could start to hold politicians and judges and police officers accountable for destroying our communities, for destroying families, for being careless with evidence and information. We have that responsibility. Matter of fact, we have that opportunity now to gather together. And what if we all merged on Congress? What if we as a church gathered together and we led a charge to get rid of absolute immunity? They should not have immunity. You know why? Because when a doctor does something wrong, a doctor has to pay for what they've done. When you break the law and you break the speed limit, they give you a ticket. A judge, a politician, and a police officer should have the same thing. We realize that sometimes people do things that are wrong. We just want them to be held accountable. By removing absolute immunity, we can be able to hold everybody accountable. But in today's society, in 2020, there are some levels of our government that no matter what they do, you as a civilian, you as a people, you can't go after them. If we change the law and we remove absolute immunity, just as you're responsible for your actions, so will politicians, so will judges, and so will police officers. So we realize that when somebody breaks the law, regardless of who you are, you're going to have to stand and be held accountable. We understand that in Christianity, because on the day of judgment, when the Lord returns, everybody's going to have to face Jesus Christ and give an answer for the things that they've done. In the end, there is absolute justice. But today we have an opportunity. But today, instead of being angry and fussing and being distracted by looting, the looting is not the real issue. It's a distraction. You can have 10,000 people who march peacefully. You can have 100 people who loot, and the only thing that they want to focus on is the looting. Those are not the real issues. Don't be distracted by all of this foolishness. Until we go into the court and change the law and remove immunity, we cannot hold these individuals accountable. Those are my perspectives on what to move forward. We can scream, we can shout, we can sing. I don't mind praying. I love praying. But after we finish praying, what are we going to do? We got to move. Because faith without works is a dead religion.